Imagine walking up to your father and telling him you wish he were already dead, not because you hated him, but because you wanted your inheritance early. In the world Jesus lived in, those words meant something terrifying. A son who said that could be cut off forever. And yet, in this story, the father does something no one expected, something so shocking that the crowd listening to Jesus would have gasped, because this is not just a story about rebellion. It is a story about a love that refuses to let shame have the final word. And if you have ever felt like your past disqualified you from a second chance, this story was told for you. I grew up in a good home. My father was respected in our village. His fields stretched across the hills, and his workers trusted him. Our house was full of food, conversation, and the quiet rhythm of a life that rarely changed. My older brother loved that life. He woke early, worked the land, and carried himself with the steady confidence of someone who knew his place in the world. But I was restless. Every sunrise felt predictable. Every day looked like the one before it. The same fields, the same conversations, the same expectations. And slowly a dangerous thought began to grow inside me. What if there was more? More life, more excitement, more freedom beyond these hills? That thought stayed with me until one day I finally spoke the words that would change everything. I walked up to my father and said, "Father, give me my share of the inheritance." In our culture, inheritance was given when a father died. What I was really saying was this: I want your wealth, but I do not want your presence. The courtyard went silent. The workers stopped what they were doing. My older brother stared at me as if he could not believe what he had just heard. But my father did something unexpected. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. Instead, he divided the estate. And within days, I packed my belongings, took the money meant for my future, and walked away from the home that had raised me. At the time, it felt like freedom. But looking back now, I understand something I could not see then. Sometimes the most dangerous thing God allows us to have is the very thing we insist we want. The city felt alive. Markets burst with color, music spilled into the streets, laughter echoed from taverns long after the sun had set. For the first time in my life, no one knew my past. No one knew my father. No one knew the expectations I had walked away from. And that anonymity felt intoxicating. If you have ever moved somewhere new, started over in a new place, or entered a room where no one knows your story, you know that feeling, the sense that you can finally become whoever you want to be. At first, life was thrilling. Money opened every door. Tables were always full. Friends appeared everywhere. The laughter was constant. But I learned something that people rarely say out loud. When money is flowing, so are the smiles. When the money stops, the smiles disappear. Gold coins slipped through my fingers faster than I imagined. New clothes, endless feasts, nights filled with noise and celebration. Yet the excitement slowly began to fade. The music was still loud, but something inside me was growing quiet. Let me ask you something. Is it really freedom if it slowly empties your soul? Because that is what was happening to me. On the outside, my life looked exciting. On the inside, something was beginning to collapse. Then the famine came. It arrived quietly at first. Fields stopped producing. Markets began to empty. Bread became harder to find. People who once spent freely began guarding every coin. And suddenly, the man who once threw feasts could not buy a single meal. I searched everywhere for work. Finally, a farmer gave me a job, but it was the lowest work imaginable, feeding pigs. For a Jewish man, pigs were considered unclean animals. Living among them was humiliation. Every day I stood in the mud, surrounded by animals, watching them eat from the trough. The smell was overwhelming, but the hunger was worse. One afternoon I stared at the pods the pigs were eating, and I wanted them. That was the moment the truth finally broke through my pride. Sometimes you do not realize how far you have fallen until you are sitting in the mud of your own decisions. And if we are honest, many of us know that moment, not necessarily in a pigsty, but in regret, in choices we wish we could undo, in nights when the silence becomes louder than the noise we once used to escape our thoughts. And it was there, in the lowest place of my life, that I remembered my father. A memory began to return. My father's house. The servants there always had enough food. Even the hired workers lived better than I was living now. And suddenly a fragile hope appeared. I could not return as a son. I had destroyed that privilege, but perhaps I could return as a servant. So I began rehearsing the words I would say, over and over again. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. I practiced those words like a man preparing for judgment, because that is what I expected: rejection, anger, shame. But hunger has a strange way of giving courage. And so I stood up. I wiped the mud from my face, and I began the long journey home. The road home felt longer than the road away. Every hill carried a memory. Every tree reminded me of the boy I once was. And the closer I came to my father's land, the heavier my heart became. Shame has weight. I imagined the whispers, "There goes the foolish son. He wasted everything. He dishonored his father." Perhaps some people did whisper, but I kept walking, because when you have nothing left, hope becomes the only thing that keeps you moving forward. And somewhere deep inside, I wondered something I could not answer. Would my father even open the door before I even reached the gate? My father saw me. The distance between us was still long, but he recognized the way I walked, and something extraordinary happened. My father ran. In our culture, respected men did not run. Running required lifting your robe. It exposed your legs and brought embarrassment to an elder. Yet my father did not hesitate. He ran past the workers, past the neighbors, past every whisper that might follow. Some believe he ran to reach me before anyone else could, because in our culture a rebellious son could face public rejection. But my father reached me first. He wrapped his arms around me before anyone else could speak, before anyone could accuse, before I could even finish my apology. And in that moment I realized something I had never understood before. Grace runs faster than shame. I tried to begin the speech I had practiced. "Father, I have sinned." But my father interrupted me, not with anger, with celebration. He turned to the servants and said, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him." The robe belonged to my father. It covered the rags I had returned in. Then he said, "Put a ring on his finger." The ring represented authority. It meant I belonged to the family again. Then he said, "Put sandals on his feet." Servants walked barefoot. Sons wore sandals. With those 3 gifts, my father restored everything I thought I had lost. Not as a servant, as a son. Then he ordered the fattened calf to be prepared. Music filled the house. Laughter returned to the courtyard, and my father spoke words I will never forget. "This son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." But not everyone celebrated. My older brother stood outside the house, angry. He had stayed. He had worked. He had followed every rule. And now the one who had wasted everything was being welcomed with a feast. If you have ever watched someone who made terrible decisions receive grace, you may understand how he felt, because we live in a world that believes fairness means reward for the good and punishment for the bad. But my father said something that changed everything. "My son, you are always with me. Everything I have is yours." But we had to celebrate, because this was never about fairness. It was about restoration. And sometimes the hardest truth to accept is this: grace given to someone else does not take anything away from you. This story has echoed through history for a reason, because everyone listening eventually realizes something, doing everything right, but struggling to understand grace. And some of us are simply standing at a distance, wondering if the Father would still welcome us. But the heart of this story remains the same. God is not standing with folded arms waiting to punish you. He is watching the road, waiting, ready to run, ready to restore, ready to remind you that your worst chapter is never the final sentence of your story, and the seat at the Father's table is still waiting for you. If this story reminded you that second chances are real, share it with someone who needs to hear that they can still come home.